So now we have the front panel, the bottom panel, and the back panel all put together, and it has a top stitch to make it secure. Now the next thing, I mean, we would think that it would be to go ahead and stitch up the sides and then make the gusset bottom. However, we have one step before we do that. Remember those D-rings and the side attachments that we had put together earlier? This is the time when we put them in. On the back, with our quilted back, we're going to position our rings on the side, right in the middle, right here. The point of my triangle is going to come and match up with where the back fabric meets my cork. And I'm gonna use my clips again because I do not want to damage my cork. I'm gonna make sure that these are stitched on. I'm not going to use a full 1/2 inch seam allowance on these because I want that attachment to be hidden inside of the seam. So I'll probably use like 1/8 of an inch or 1/4 of an inch seam allowance to base these on to keep them in place. And so now what we have are our connectors that are secure. Now I can go ahead, turn my whole bag inside out and stitch down along the edge. All right, so I made a huge mistake just a minute ago. I actually sewed up the sides of my bag prematurely. I still have a couple of steps that I need to get done, completing the back portion of my bag. And so, let me set that aside. There are some details, some elements that still need to go onto the back of the backpack. We have the straps, we have the hang loop, which is that I decided to do out of cork. It's gonna hang, it's that loop that you can, just kind of carry by your finger or hang it on a peg somewhere, keep the backpack from sitting on the ground. So you have your hang loop, and then you have your strap reinforcement, and we have the upper closure. The upper closure has the D-rings on it that are going to connect with that lower closure that I attached to the front right above the zipper. Now, let's just kind of talk a little bit about how we make all of these things. They're pretty basic, guys. I mean, you went through the process of making those straps, and they're nice and long, and they're double stitched, and all, the seams are all in, the cut edge is all enclosed. Everything is nice and neat. The same thing holds true for our upper closure. So I did the same thing as before. I'll leave that there. It's a wide piece of fabric that has interfacing on it, folded it in half, tucked those raw edges in and the bottom edge, and I stitched around it. Now I have a finished bottom edge, but I have an open top edge. That's how I want it. The instructions say that what we need to do is measure 3 inches from the bottom, which I have done. It's kind of hard to see because it's in yellow, but 3 inches from the bottom. I'm then going to take my D-rings, my 2 D-rings, and slip them on the top and fold that raw edge over. It's going to overlap by roughly 3/4 of an inch below my 3-inch line. And then I'm going to just stitch across to hold it in place. I'm going to stitch on that 3-inch line. Let me pin it because that will make my life just a little bit easier. So now, guys, I have my D-rings in place. They're not gonna fall off. On the back, you see that it's a raw edge, but that's okay because in just a moment, I'm going to attach this to the back, that foam padded back of my backpack, and stitch around, which makes this raw edge enclosed so it's not going to fray or come unraveled. I'll do that in just a minute. The other elements that I did, like I said, I have the hang loop here. Now I made it out of cork, which means that when I cut my piece, I cut it a little bit. I cut it about a 1/2 inch shorter. Now the cork, if you remember, I cannot pin. So I just eyeballed the center of my cork strip. You can use a marking pen to mark that if you want. Fold in one side, and then I did my double stitching all the way down one side, fold the other side in, and carefully did the double stitching along the other side. So what we have is a nice clean hang tag. Now cork is such that it's not going to unravel. It is very durable, and it's only with, if those cut edges were on the side and they were gonna get a whole lot of wear and tear, bumping up against things and rubbing up against things, that's when it's gonna start wearing. But it being against itself on the hang tag, like this, it's not going to get that wear and tear. So you have a very secure, wearable piece right here. The last piece that I did was the strap reinforcement, and this is going to go horizontally across the back of your bag. It is simply the strip that they instructed you to cut with the interfacing on the back, and then you just fold the ends in, press it, and there you go. Okay, so the way we're gonna put those on is very important. It's important for you to measure and see exactly where it needs to go, because everything needs to line up. For as much as they seem to be kind of random, you want them to line up. So the pattern now wants us to measure the center of the backpack going across the top. It's 15.5 inches. Mine measured 15.5 inches, so I came in 7 3/4 to find the center, and then measure 5 inches down from the top edge. I made a mark right here. This is a spot where my D-rings, my upper closure, will be stitched down. So I'll take my pins and I'm going to pin the length, just so that my presser foot doesn't run over anything. So I'm going to pin, it's right in the middle, and I'll stitch up and around. To get that double stitch look that I've been going with before, I originally have a stitch line going 1/8 of an inch from the edge. I'm gonna stitch this now another 1/8 in, so it's gonna be 1/4 of an inch from the edge all the way around. That's going to secure this bottom raw edge that was there, that we saw when I put the D-rings on. So now I have my top closure, my upper closure secure. It is in place. The next step is going to be to put the hang loop, and I'm just going to line up the cut edge of my cork with the bottom edge of the hang loop here, or with the closure there. And in this case, I can go ahead and stitch it down, or pin it down rather, because this part of the cork is not going to show. So here I have my hang loop attached. It's going to basically look like that, okay? Now the last element that I'm gonna do for right now is to place the strap reinforcement right across the bottom of the hang loop and the bottom of my loop closure. So I'll pin that in place, and with this step I'm only going to stitch down the bottom edge, because after this I'm going to need to attach my straps, the actual straps for the backpack. So here we have it. We have the strap reinforcer here, and it's going to help to pin down both your loop and your hang tag, or rather your hang tag and your closure with the D-rings. Once I have the straps attached to my D-rings down here, they will come up and tuck into this space, the reinforcer space, and I'll be able to stitch that part down. Once I have all of that put together, Now that's when I can sew up the sides of my bag and finish the outside, the exterior of my bag. So the next step of our process is to put the bag sliders on the straps. It's really an easy process. I've done it already to one of our straps, so I'm going to do it to the second one so that you can see. Now the ends of my straps look like this, and what I'm going to do is just loop one end of the strap up and through the little slider bar. Okay, so the slider bar is right in the middle. I just loop it through. I'm going to pull it a little ways. I'm going to need to fold this raw end over just by a little bit and turn it like that. Okay, the distance that from where my end is here to my slider needs to be roughly 2 inches. So I can take that to my mat and check it, and I'm a little bit long. So I have 2 inches there. Keeping these, this folded edge under, I'm going to do a stitch to secure. I'm going to go over it twice to secure this little edge so that it doesn't come apart, because it's going to receive quite a bit of pull and tug as we go through. So now my bag strap slider is secure. I've stitched a couple of times going across to keep that raw edge tucked under and keep it secure. I have 2 of them now. So the next step is going to be to put the strap into the holders at the base of the backpack. To do that, I'm going to keep my slider up top. I'm going to loop the cut edge of my strap bottom up through my ring, and then slide it through my slider. Just like that, and it's secure. This part of the strap, this raw edge now, is going to tuck up and in to the back support strip right here. So I'm going to go ahead and get my other strap doing the same thing. When you place the slider, or when you place the strap down with the slider, make sure that the side of that closure is up. The bumpy side is up, so it seems like it's the inside, right? So that's going to go there. So my straps are ready to go. I'm going to position my straps right on the outside of my hang loop right here. One goes to the left. Make sure that it's not twisted when you position it. Let me grab some pins. And the other one to the right. You're going to make sure your cut edge meets up right at the bottom of the support strip. And then once I have this in place, I'm going to take it to the machine and stitch right across the top to close that whole strip down, close it up so that everything is secure. My straps, my cork loop, and my top closure will all be secure in that one space. And here it is. Now I only put one stitch, that one seam across the top. I'm going to quickly do a second one just to get that double finished top stitch look, and then we can move on to the next step. So our next step here in our bag to make our backpack is to actually make the outside body of the backpack, put it all together. I've gone ahead and pinned all the way down the sides, both sides. Because of the cork, I didn't do my pins regularly down on this end, but it's okay because the cork is so firm and stable that you're going to be able to control it very well by yourself without any pins. I did put one at the end here just to make sure that I get the ends together. I'm going to start on that end for this side and come down. I want to make sure that I finish with my ends, the cut ends together here. And I did the same on the opposite side of the bag. Now I want you guys to be super careful. There's a whole lot of stuff going on inside of the bag. Make sure that everything is pushed out of the way before you pin and before you sew. It'll keep from being bulky And of course, you won't have a big mess inside that you're gonna have to pick out at the end. So I'm going to sew up both sides, and then we're going to address the bottom, the base of the bag. And I'll show you how that goes so that you can get a nice flat square bottom on your bag. Okay, so with the cork side up with my notches cut out here, I have sewn all the way down both sides of my bag. It's now time for me to go ahead and make the flat bottom of my backpack. And so the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to turn and open out this L shape. Just kind of pull it to open it and flatten like that. Now the question comes up, what do we do about the seam allowance here? Very simply, we're going to open it up. And then using the same seam allowance that you were using before, you're going to stitch across this bottom edge. That's going to secure the bottom base of your bag so that it makes that nice flat bottom so your bag will stand up on its own. So I've gone ahead and done my stitching here on the bottom of my bag, on the cork side of my bag, and you can see that I have a nice flat bottom created. So what I'm going to go ahead and do at this point, since the outside of my bag is already put together, is turn it inside out. Yes, it looks like a manhandling, but it doesn't really matter. Okay, so can you see how the cork, being just without any kind of fusible interfacing on it, is so secure, so stiff and stable? It will hold the bag up very nicely. Okay, so this is the outside of our bag now. Looks pretty good. We're almost finished. Our next step, let me set that aside, is going to be to make our inside pocket for the lining that'll be attached to the lining of the bag. Now, the cutting instructions had wanted us to cut 2 10-inch squares out of the lining fabric and then 1 piece of fusible interfacing for the 10-inch square that will be attached to one side of just 1 piece of the pocket lining. We're going to place the 2 10-inch squares together. I'm going to pin and stitch all the way around and leave a 6-inch space here so that I can turn it inside out. When I'm done, I'll press it and we'll have a nice pocket that's going to be able to be stitched directly onto the inside lining of my bag. So I have the inside pocket created for my bag, but before I can turn it inside out, I have to cut off my corners just to reduce the amount of bulk that's going to be pushed into these corners. It'll help my corners to be nice and pointy and to lay flat and not bumpy. So I made my pocket, went all the way around like you saw me do, pressed it, turned it inside out, pressed it, and I have my square pocket done. Now, before I attach it to the lining of my bag, I have already stitched a detailed top stitch across the top, the same double detailed top stitch that I've done with the rest of the bag. Now, the placement of the pocket is going to be 8 inches from the top edge. I'm going to bring the top of the pocket 8 inches down and have it right here in the middle of the bag lining. To find the middle, I just folded it over, finger pressed, and I made this pink mark to let you guys know exactly where it is. But here's my 8-inch location here. And so I'm gonna go ahead and pin that and then get it sewn down. When I sew it, I'm going to do the double stitching again, the 2 lines. I'll go right around, and then the second time, I'm going to cut across at the top with my stitching, and that's just to secure that top edge of the pocket so that as you open it and close it, it doesn't wear and start to sag on you. So that's just a little detail that you're going to need to put in. We're coming into the final stretch, guys. The inside of the bag, the lining of the bag is almost there. We have the pocket in place, and you can see that I have it all secured, double stitched all the way around the sides and reinforced at the corners. My next step is going to be to put the whole inside lining of the bag together. So I'm just gonna take my two pieces, put them faces together, and I'm going to pin all the way around and sew. Okay, so I've sewn my lining fabrics together. I made sure to backstitch at each end of my seams. I went from the top all the way down to the bottom and came across. Now I need to leave about an 8-inch hole, a good sizable hole in the bottom edge of my lining, because that's how I'm going to turn my entire bag inside out. So make sure you leave a good amount of space. 8 inches is a nice amount of space to work with. Hop over to the other side, back stitch to the end and all the way up. So we have one end, the top edge, that is completely open. The next step is going to be to make that nice flat bottom edge for the bag, just like we did with the cork, right? So I marked 2-inch squares on the bottom here, and I'm going to cut each one out and then fold them and stitch them the same way that I did the cork. Very straightforward. Anybody who's been making bags or has done anything like this, you guys understand the whole process. I want you to make sure that as you bring your corners together, just like we did with the cork, I made sure that my seam was pressed open, right? That's going to allow for the bulk that's hanging out in the bottom to be dispersed and go away. So make sure the seams are open when you stitch it together. Okay, we're almost there, 2 more steps. So here's the bottom of our bag with the flattened edge. This is the interior, the lining, and here's the opening. There's the opening that we're going to use to turn the entire backpack inside out. The way we're going to put it together is with the backpack with the right side out, and then with the lining right side in, okay? So the right sides are going to touch. Make sure that the side that has the pocket on it, which is this side, you can see through the stitching, the inside pocket is on this side. Make sure that when you slide the backpack in, the back of the backpack is on the same side as the pocket. Even with all of that interfacing and the cork and the foam in there, and the straps, the backpack all fits really well inside of the lining. So what we're gonna do now is make sure that our side seams match up, which I'll do in just a second. Side seams are gonna match up. I'm gonna pin all the way around and sew all the way around completely. I don't wanna leave any spaces, okay? All the way around. Okay, we're all matched up, all pinned together. Make sure that when you start to sew, all of your inside pieces, your straps, your loops, your connectors are all out of the way so that you're not going to actually sew on top. So I'm ready to sew, but because the machine doesn't give a whole lot of space underneath, I'm going to release the free arm of my machine. This is what tailors and garment makers usually do to allow for more space for your fabric to get underneath the machine. So here I am. There it is. So I can duck underneath, and then I'm going to use my 1/2-inch seam allowance like I was doing before. Don't forget to backstitch. And as you sew, lift up the front of your fabric. That's going to take away the drag so that the fabric is able to move through your machine a lot easier. So I made it all the way around the top lip of my bag. Now here is where the magic happens. Remember the hole that I left in the bottom of my lining? Now I'm going to push the whole bag through that hole. The bottom hole of the lining is getting a whole lot of wear and tear right now just in turning the bag inside out. It's really important, guys, and you know this already. Make sure you backstitch, because that backstitch is going to keep that opening from opening all the way up, right? All right, so I have my bag turned completely inside out, and yay me, I did not stitch any of my fixtures to the lining. So now I can push my lining into the bag. But wait, before I can do that, let me close up my hole. Guys, I'm just gonna tug a little bit and tuck those raw ends in. I'll pin and just do a quick stitch across to hold it tight and secure it together. You can take it to your iron and give it a quick press. That will help to keep a nice straight seam also, or you can eyeball it. And I'm just gonna stitch 1/8 of an inch from the edge because I just want to close that little spot up. Top edge of my bag, it looks a little unkempt, it looks pretty sloppy. So what I'm gonna do is fold it in, I'm gonna hit it with the iron real quick, pin so that my lining is not showing on the outside. So pin with that seam right on top. And then I'm gonna do one stitch, just a single stitch all the way around. All right, so I've done my stitching all the way around. Now I did say that you could take it to the iron before you stitch the top lip down. You can take it to the iron, get that seams pressed really nice and flat, and then pin. If you want to pin afterward before you stitch around just to make sure everything stays in place, you can. But hitting with the iron is gonna keep it in place really, really well. And so you won't really need that those pins to hold it together. But my bag is done. Guys, look at how cool this is. The top of it is gonna fold over just like this. Here's my top closure here. Let me lay it down. My top closure is here. My bottom closure is here. And I'm just gonna slip it through those D-rings to close it up. Isn't that cool? So my bag is all done. There you go. I have a nice pocket in the front, the pleated pocket in the front. Remember we did that one? And just to put a nice little detail on it, I'm gonna put a little dangle that says handmade. And I'm going to attach it to my zipper so that anybody who comes along and says, ooh, that's a really great looking bag, where'd you get it? Yeah, it's handmade. I made it myself. Guys, I hope that you were able to get through the steps for this bag really easily. It's not a difficult bag, especially if you've made bags in the past. As a beginning bag maker, you might find a few little challenges here and there, but honestly, this is one of the best patterns for bags that I've come across in a long time. So I hope that you've enjoyed it. Drop a note in the comments below and tell me what you think. Shoot me an email at info@aneedleandthread.com if you have any questions, if you'd like more information, if you need anything you need another kit. Let me know and I'd be happy to take care of you guys. I hope you come back for my next one. I'll see you then.